Greetings from a very chilly Rwanyanshando. Uh, I thought I'd share with you a little bit of history about coffee on this farm and the process that we go through as part of the regime before it gets to your cup, wherever it is that you are. We actually don't know where that is. Um, Coffee was introduced to this particular farm in 1954 by my grandfather, who is now 109 years of age. He introduced it 4 years after starting out here, and exactly 4 years after he had set up his banana plantation. Because the place where we originate from here, is called Rukanja, and then before that, Buweju. We are in Kashari, in Mbarara, and people came to Kashari because they had gotten a little bit enlightened and discovered that Kashari was hospitable towards Matoke. It had the right soils and could grow Matoke for food, which they needed. So they came, set up, uh, got land, got married. He married my grandmom from here, uh, set up his home, grew Matoke, and then started out with coffee 4 years later. In fact, he tells me that the coffee that he planted here were seedlings that he had gotten from my grandmother's dad's farm in Rukanja. So we've had coffee here since 1954. It's now 2020. Um, my grandmom tells me that most of the people who got money back in the day got it from coffee. It was a major source of income for them. That was probably because in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, before Idi Amin and presidents thereafter, most agriculture enterprises were congregated together in the form of marketing boards for coffee, for cotton, for sisal, uh, for cattle, for both animals and crops, because the colonial governments then were purchasing those products at very low prices from farmers across the country and across East Africa pretty much, exporting via Mombasa and Dar es Salaam to mostly England and the United Kingdom. So every little farmer, however small or big your parcel of land was, you could ably uh, produce as much as you could and contribute towards the rations that were needed by the coffee marketing board and be paid either per kilo or per sack or per the amount of produce that you had contributed. And whether the prices were low or high, or while the coffee marketing board was operating or not, we've always had coffee here. You can still see uh, coffee trees that are 50 years old. You can see trees that are 30 years old that still produce coffee, which is quite amazing for me, that even in their old age they are still able to produce very good amounts of coffee. This particular plantation in which I'm standing is the youngest of coffee that we have here. It's about uh, 7 years old. This was planted by my dad before he died during the uh, prominent times of the NADS program. They gave out seedlings to government employees or to those that were asking for or buying from them. And my dad got a couple of seedlings of coffee, Robusta in particular, is what we have here, to come and plant here to intercrop with matoke. This particular parcel had both matoke and coffee. When the coffee grew, the matoke was taken out. So the major crop husbandry section of the farm has now been divided into two, part matoke and part coffee. Um, for the time that I've been managing it, that's since November, I have seen that indeed coffee is really lucrative if you pay attention to it. That is, if you maintain it or if you touch it well, it will give you back much more than you invest in it. The maintenance is not so complex as long as if you are lucky enough for your seedlings to grow and you have people to help you with the weeding, to reduce on the competition with the crop itself, in respect to the roots, that network of the roots of the plant. Um, uh, and then to keep picking the red berries as they ripen, ready enough for harvesting. Uh, in that respect, I have a lady whom I pay to walk through the plantation every single day, or to see which sections are ripe enough for picking, to see when she's supposed to come back, to see which plants we need to sacrifice in order to plant new seedlings. For example, to fill up gaps that lack trees, either those that didn't grow or those that don't yield well enough, or those that have become bad from illnesses. Uh, Also, we spray it against using fungicides against fungal infections. And then another disease that we discovered recently when my sister Annette had visited was that some of the leaves were reddening, turning brown, as you can see here. You see these marks over here, and that was also something that affected some of the berries, the beans. So we spray twice a year, around about March, April, August, September, such that when the berries start appearing on the when the berries start appearing on the branches, they hold firm, they are produced in more quantities, and they stay firm, and that the leaves don't have these spots, probably from fungal infections. Um, I employed, the last time we did it in April, early April of this year, 2020, I had 5 gentlemen um, with sprayers who went around the plantation over a course of 3 days. Um, over November, December, and January, most of the coffee, most of the income that we earned on the farm, most of it came from crops, was coffee, and from animals was the piggery. I love the coffee bit because it wasn't so complex. Because after harvesting the berries, we collect them in the in the produce store at home. Uh, Not just store it, but we go ahead to dry the coffee ourselves until it is over a course of about 3 days for a single day. A single day's harvest dries over a course of 3 to 4 days, and when the sunshine is out and good enough, uh, and then we take it to a milling machine in our trading center in Rubindi, from where we get what we call what the locals here call clean. They call it clean because it's the most fine grind that you can get. It's not a fine grind, but it's just good enough to go. So that clean is not even clean enough because it has uh, both the clean itself, yes, and the the husks that have come off as residues from the milling process, which are also sold later. They have a name I don't remember. Uh, the clean mill, the grind is sold for on average 4,000 per kilo. So the more kilos you have, the more money you bring in. I would have it. It's unfortunate I didn't look at my uh, records for the period of November, December, and January before I made this video. But I would have told you how much kilograms and how much money we made. over that period. Uh, but I'll share it maybe in a comment or something later, or if you remind me and ask either in an email or a text or something. So I wanted to show you this because I'm reminded that I thought about how when we're in school, we were told that coffee grows best in regions of the foothills of the Kilimanjaro. And when I grew older, through my own research and documentaries, we learned about the origins of coffee in Ethiopia, in places like Java. But I would like to encourage you that coffee can grow anywhere really in Uganda, well, for most places, as long as you meet the most basic requirements and you can intercrop it with other crops. As an example from here, we have planted fast-growing crops this season, like beans, for example. In fact, right now I'm standing, if don't know if you can check it out very well. These are beans that need weeding, young beans that need weeding. That is maize, and that is cassava. So I planted up to about 500 stems of cassava, and then um, in that is in 5 acres. And then the beans I brought to the beans. Now here's the trick. I spent a lot of money on weeding because the weeds when I came around were knee high, and I'm a 5'8" tall person. So the beans were a trick to invite the locals who don't have land to cultivate, so that they could plant their own crops, and in the process help me with weeding. So I don't pay any weeding cost, maybe for this whole season is about 4 months. However, when I get out, I may either invite them back in, which is taking a risk that will interrupt the growth of the root network for the coffee plantation itself, or I'll have to mulch it. It'll be a little expensive, but what we need is available to mulch. So you can intercrop it with other crops. So your land can serve several purposes for both a cash crop and some food crops. Um, that might bring you to the reality that most of the places, especially around here, have been overcrowded. One of the disadvantages of owning land now is land fragmentation. If you don't buy in big acreage, maybe a square mile or more, but that is expensive for people. Now, since everyone is having children, they want their own children to have their own pieces of land. Uh, Most people have fragmented these parcels of land into smaller pieces. What that means that if you have the blessing of a piece of land like we do, as big as it might be, and you have designed it to accommodate as many pieces or as many pieces to the puzzle of the agriculture enterprise that is setting up, you stand a much better advantage if you add value to what you're producing. I have seen what uh, having your crop harvested and then taken to the milling factories can do. But I know I can do better because I know if I can process this into a fine grind that I can serve as a drink in a coffee shop that I've set up either on the farm or in a town that has a lot of traffic or in a town that has very good coffee drinking culture, I should be able to get more money for the value that I add along the process. And that is the direction in which we're heading in. I'll be glad to share with you when I get to that point in about a month or two, probably after this major harvest, which will be in either June or July. See you then. Cheers.